What's going on, Falcon fans? This is your boy Ricondo coming back at you with another video. So today we're going to talk about what the GM of the Atlanta Falcons had to say on his introductory press conference. We're just going to take some tidbits, some quotes that he said, break down those quotes. It's go time, man. It's go time. The front office is in place. He's been here a couple of days now. He's talking about his meetings and things like that, getting ready, get with the scouts. Um, the big meeting he's gonna have sit down and have with the president of football, the head coach, the two coordinators, offensive defensive coordinator. Kind of get an idea of where they need to go from here. Um, I like some of the things he said. I talk about some of those things today. And then at the end, guys, as promised, I was going to talk about some free agents that the Atlanta Falcons could definitely target going into the 2026 season. If you watched my breakdown yesterday about how much cap space the Atlanta Falcons could possibly generate, don't know if that's going to be the case. Um, but at the same time, they do have the opportunity to do that, based off what they feel about the roster and the things moving forward. Really, a lot of things that the GM had to say, it was really interesting, and you like the fact that he's thinking about the future as well. So we're really gonna get into that. So guys, with that being said, if you have not already, go ahead and please subscribe to this channel. Please hit that notification bell so you know when I drop another video. Please hit the like button. So I know you guys out here that I talk about. Then please share this video throughout the YouTube universe to all the other Atlanta Falcons faithful out there, so you can come hear me talk about. That's right, guys. These Atlanta Falcons. So, like I said, guys, we're gonna talk about Mr. Cunningham himself today. He was introduced today. We're not gonna go over his whole career, but of course, he had his stops. He started his career back in which was interesting. I didn't know this. He came in 2008, the same year Matt Ryan became the Atlanta Falcons quarterback, and he started with the Baltimore Ravens, worked his way up, getting to be an area scouts. Um, Spent like 8 years with the Baltimore Ravens. Go over to the Philadelphia Eagles where he spent about 5 or 6 years there, and then he ended up with the Chicago Bears assistant general manager. So he has worked his way up through the whole scouting department, sort of like what we saw from Terry Fontenot, right? A guy that worked his way up. So he's been in the front office his whole career. He knows the ins and outs. Been part of two Super Bowl teams, and then he's also been part of a sort of a rebuild. What we see in Chicago, right? Was there for 4 seasons, and you saw the product, the finished product of what they was going into the playoffs this year. So, he knows how to take teams that's already kind of built and get a picture of how to do that. Some of the best, GMs of our generation right now. You're talking about Howard Roseman in Philadelphia, the way he's able to build the Philadelphia Eagles. Then, of course, everybody knows about Eric DeCosta and I can't think of his name. You, the other guy from Baltimore. Damn, can't think of his name. Ozzie Newsome. Damn, there you go. Ozzie Newsome from Baltimore. So both of those guys. Then Ryan Poles. Where he, like I said, he had to come in. Ryan Poles had to pretty much rebuild the Chicago Bears from the jump. So, just getting an idea, philosophy, the mind for building his own philosophy from all those guys, all those things he got to learn from those guys. So, um, I think I think right now, when you listen to me, I'm always a glass half full guy. I'm not going to come on here and be negative because we just don't know. I can get negative. Don't get me wrong. I will get negative. But right at this point, it's all about optimism. It's all about positive vibes because this is a new era, and we're gonna think positive about what we're gonna hear from Mr. Cunningham. So I'm going to go over a couple things that I took from it, and I kind of elaborate on it, and then definitely hear you guys' thoughts on about all those good stuff. What's going on, T Terry? What's going on, Joy Maladoon? 39-39. All right, so let's get into the first um, thing I want to talk about and build from the trenches. I think this is something that when we talked about, which sounds like it's consistent throughout what we heard from Matt Ryan, we heard from um, Kevin Stefanski, and we heard from Ian Cunningham, right? They want to build a physical football team. And how do you do that? Is building from the trenches, right? So we all know Ian Cunningham was a former offensive lineman. So of course he's going to have some biases to the trenches. But in my opinion, this is the right approach, right? You build from the trenches. You got to be able to run the ball. You got to be able to stop the run, right? If you're able to do that, you make teams, especially on the defensive side, one dimensional. If you can stop the run, you make a team one dimensional. You make them play the game you want to make them play. If you're able to run the ball, you dictate how you want to be able to run your offense because you can run it and set up your pass off of that. So, the trenches is always going to be important, and this is what their vision is. We know that the Atlanta Falcons have a vision. We know they're going to be a team that wants to run the ball and set up the pass off of that. And on the defense side of the ball, they want to be able to stop the run and be able to get out the quarterback. You have to do that within the trenches. So I love that as a vision, you know, for the utmost. I like that. That's one of the things he talked about today is building up the offense and defensive lines. And, it's the cover that's not bare, to quote what he was saying, that so it is some talent in those areas, but you can always upgrade. So whatever they do, looking at film, if they want to upgrade in those areas, they definitely can, because that should be the focus, trying to make the best offense and defensive line you got. You got a nice offensive line, but it can be better, right? You got a nice defensive line, but we know the defensive line can be better. So those are some of the things that I like, from a vision standpoint, coming in, and it seems like all three guys are aligned on that vision in itself is building from the trenches, right? It's easy to say, you know, get enamored by the flashy, on prospects and things like that. But if you start in the trenches, I think you have a really good foundation to build your team that can sustain for a long time, and that's what the Atlanta Falcons are trying to do. You look at those '90s Cowboys, right? That offensive line was one of the best offensive lines, ever. That's why Emmitt Smith, is the all-time leading rusher, because he played behind all those big boys on the offensive line. They understood that that's how you play football, and people think they're getting away from the run game, but no, it's still here. We see it now. It's coming back, making it more prevalent, because if you can run the ball, you can control the game, right? Time possession, possession football, all those good things. Keep your defense fresh by by running the ball. So that's what you want to do on the offense side of the ball, and defense side of the ball. Like I said, make them one dimensional, and if you can do that, you'll be set for good. So one of the things he mentioned was build from the trenches, and it's consistent what we heard from the president of football, Matt Ryan, and the head coach, Kevin Stefanski. So I like that right off the bat. So guys, let me know what you think about that. Do you think that we're going to be looking at some good offensive defensive fronts here, in 2026? All right, next thing he mentioned was, and I thought this was really interesting. Um, and this is a change from, in my opinion. Maybe this is how the last regime thought, but they never really mentioned it. And this is what he mentioned. He mentioned draft, develop, and retain. Right. So you want to build your team from the draft. Everybody says that. That's nothing new. You do want to build your team from the draft, right? But the three things all you tied together, right? Because if you can draft players, you develop your players, and you want to retain those players that you drafted, right? That's how you build a team. Because when you building it from that vision standpoint, how can you utilize this player that we drafted, right? Can we develop him and get him even better than what it was when we drafted him? And then once he do get to that ceiling that you want him in, can you retain him? That's the things that I like. I like this philosophy: draft, develop, and retain. If they can actually come up with that philosophy. I think that's going to be real smooth, and this is a good way to do it. You want to draft, develop, and retain. Now, the Atlanta Falcons only got 5 draft picks. We're going to talk about what he said about draft picks here in a minute, but what you guys think about this whole draft, develop, and retain? Right, you build your team from the draft. This is something that if you look at how Howie Roseman built the Philadelphia Eagles, right? You look at that defense, the defense side of the ball, you got a lot of guys that they drafted, right? And when you draft good players, you can actually put the other pieces around them so you can have a solid team. So you got drafted players that's on young rookie contracts, now and eventually it's going to come to a head, right? So you got to continue to draft, right? Because you might have to let some of those guys go, but at the same time, if you build through the draft, every time a guy that you drafted and you develop, you might not be able to retain them because they might get priced out, but you got somebody in the queue. And you think about college football and the way Nick Saban used to build his team, right? Before the whole NIL thing, he used to have 5 star on top of 5 star on top of 5 star, right? So you bring in a 5 star and you let him start, and then you go out and recruit another 5 star and you let him come in and he's developing behind the starter. And then once the starter leaves, the 5 star just step right in, and the team does not miss a beat. Right? That's how they do it in college. They can't do it like that anymore because of the whole NIL thing. But that's how they used to do it. That's why you looking at teams that had so many, NFL prospects coming out, because that's what Nick Saban used to do. He used to get guys, and he would develop those guys, and then it just guys sitting waiting behind the starter. And then once the starter leaves, you just jump right in. That's what you want to try to do with your draft picks, right? You want to draft those guys, you want to develop those guys, and if you can't retain the guy because the cap is what it is, and this guy is so dominant, you might can't. And then if you have a really good draft cast, you definitely ain't gonna be able to keep all those guys. It's just the numbers just don't work for you in some cases. So that's the way you gotta look at it. But draft, develop, and retain. I love this philosophy. And I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not saying like no other team or GM thinks like this, but I like the way they think, and I love that way. T. Terry says the trench is very important. Falcons going to draft a center and a nose tackle in this draft. There you go. There you go. I can see that. Kirby does that every season, 100%. Right. That's what Kirby does, right? It's getting harder now, though. It's really getting harder now because of the NIL. They kind of try to put 5 star top of 5 star top of 5 star, but it still should be your main focus is to recruit guys and then try to develop those guys. So when the other starter out, you don't miss a beat, and that's what you want to do in the pros as well. It's harder in the pros because of the cap space and things like that. Shorten rosters. You only got a 53-man roster, right? So it's kind of harder to do it within the NFL, but it's all about the draft. You always want to build through the draft, and you want to bring in, your auxiliary stuff through the free agency. And if you do it that way, I think you can build a really good team that sustains for a long time. All right. So let me know what you think about that. The next thing he spoke on was best player available. Right. This is most people draft philosophies. When you're going to take the best player available. I don't think this is you know a breaking news. Most GMs think this. I know he probably got this from Ozzie Newsome, right? Because this is one of his things. Go back and famously drafted Lamar Jackson at number 32, right? Even though they had Joe Flacco on the team, Lamar Jackson was the best player available, and they drafted him. And the rest is history, right? We know 2-time MVP Lamar Jackson hasn't got it done like he wanted to in the playoffs just as of yet, but you know one of the best best dual threat quarterbacks to ever play the game, and he took the best player available. Did they need a Lamar Jackson at the time? Probably not, right? Because Joe Flacco was still in his prime when they drafted him. But you see what had transpired since that pickup. So that's what you do. That's how you do it. You know, a lot of teams don't look at it that way. The Green Bay Packers, they have, right? That's why you look at Green Bay Packers. It seemed like they never been in quarterback purgatory because they had Brett Favre, they drafted Aaron Rodgers, had Aaron Rodgers, and they drafted, you know, Jordan Love, right? That's the way they did it. Look at the Pittsburgh Steelers; they did not do it that way, right? They had Ben Roethlisberger; they didn't want to draft a quarterback because they felt like they didn't need one. But maybe it was the best player available on the board at the time, and they probably could have took a quarterback, just put in a quiver, just to learn. You don't have to play right away. Um, the Atlanta Falcons didn't do that either. They had Matty Ice, and then they decided not to take a quarterback. Maybe they had a quarterback could have been the best player available. Um, so sometimes that's not going to be the case. Quarterback's not the best player available. You're going to pick the best player. Even if you got a player already in that position who's a stud at that spot, you're still going to take the best player available because now you got two studs. That's the way you look at it. Like, yeah, I didn't need him, but he's the best player on the board. And why would I pass up the best player on the board? Because you want to get the bang for your buck, right? Now, if you want to drop back and say he's the best player, but I'm going to go back, get collect some more draft picks. Then yeah, but if he's the best player on the board at the time, it's no way you can pass up that player. So this is always probably the best philosophy to have. If you're trying to draft for needs, one of the things he stated was that you know you're chasing your needs all the time if you do that, right? And that's always going to be the case because if you're thinking about a need at the number 8th overall pick or whatever the case may be, and you need a receiver, and the receiver is not the best player, it's 10 players that's on your board that's better than that receiver, you should not drop that receiver because you're chasing now. So that's the way you have to look at it. This is probably drafted 101. But sometimes teams be desperate and they'll go ahead and make a mistake like that. Like I know, especially when they do this with quarterbacks all the time, right? They take quarterbacks because they need a quarterback, but the quarterback might not been that high on your board, but you're going to take him. And people look at quarterbacks different, but I still think you need to look at the talent and see if it's worth the value because that's how you're going to affect your roster if you don't do it the right way. So I love this from a standpoint of where he laid out best player available. This was the same philosophy Terry Fontenot had, so this is not like something new. This was Terry Fontenot mindset as well. BPA, best player available. Now, the question always going to be is that the best player available? To some people's eyes, a lot of times it seems like they got enamored by a player and it was somebody else that was on the board probably was better than that player. But, you know, it's always about the fit, of course. It's always about, the way they used to call it was makeup, but it always calls about the fit in the locker room, the fit for the team and the coaching staff. So that's always going to play a role in it. Another thing you mentioned was analytics as well. So this philosophy is definitely looking at the tape. That should be everybody's philosophy. Look at the tape. What you see on the tape is what you know think can translate to the NFL, right? But then you go to the analytics to validate what you saw on the tape, right? That's what you want to say. Yeah, I can see that. Sometimes analytics ain't always right because at the end of the day, you know, the human element in football is always going to supersede everything else because you can't measure people's hearts, right? And their work ethic and how good they're going to be. That's something you can't measure, but you can see it on film. The motor, you can see the way they treat their teammates. You can see the quit or the fight that's displayed from that individual. So that's what you're looking for, and then you go validate that by looking at the numbers and things like that to help you make a wise and intelligent decision. So best player available. I think this is nothing new. I think most of us agree that that should be the philosophy that the Atlanta Falcons take moving forward, and that's the same philosophy that Terry Fontenot had. All right, let's talk about draft picks, right? And this where he was really interesting. He talked about draft picks. He said he loved draft picks, and he said it's like currency. So you're talking about draft picks. He mentioned that it's having these draft picks is definitely like currency. Um, One of the things that was really interesting, he said that when he was Chicago their first season, they had 5 picks, and they ended up with 10. Interesting comment to make, right? So, so he said we got 5 picks right now. That's exactly what he said. We got 5 picks right now. He said, but draft picks are like currency. He loved draft picks. So interesting. We might see Ian Cunningham maybe move back in the draft to collect more draft capital. And the whole idea of having more draft picks is to the more you pick, you know, the less you have at the bat, right? The more guys you got, the more chance you have to get a hit. So that's the way you look at it. So if you got 8 draft picks, you pick 8 guys, you hope 5 of those guys pan out, right? If you got 5 picks, man, you want all 5 of those because now you have less numbers. So the more picks you have, the more you have chance to get a strike, right? Or got a chance to get a hit. That's what you're looking for. So when he mentioned the draft picks, I thought it was interesting, and he said they had 5 when they first got to Chicago. They had 5 picks. They ended up with 10. How would you do that? The only way you can do that is if you move back in the draft, right, and collect draft capital. So um, this is different. Now, this is a different philosophy because most of the time we saw Terry Fontenot moving up in the draft, giving up draft capital. Um, Now he didn't say he was moving back, but it's the only way you can, get draft picks. You have to probably move back in the draft. So I haven't dug that deep into the draft as of yet, because I don't know how deep this draft is. Some drafts are deeper than others, right? But you're always going to be able to find diamonds in the rough, right? But if you start to move back in the draft, you know, you find some good 5th round picks, guys. You find some good 4th round picks. So it's not like you can't find good quality football players later on in the draft, but he's right. The more you select, the more opportunities you have to get a hit on some of those guys. So this is a good philosophy. Um, it's something different, and he mentioned draft picks a couple of times, and so it's going to be interesting to see what happened draft night, right? What they decide to do with draft picks, um, because I don't think he like only 5 draft picks. And like I said, he said we only got 5 picks right now, and he said um, he referenced the first year he was with Chicago, where they went from 5 to 10. I can't imagine going back that many times, but if you move from where they at now, I think they're 48 right now. You move to the 60s, you might can pick up another, a 5th round or a 6th round pick. So that's adding 2 more picks to your quiver. So you could do that. So I'm seeing that could be a possibility, but not 100% sure. But hey, there you go. Draft picks. That's one of the things he talked about. Um, we got a couple comments here. Let's see what they say. Eddie says best player available is based on each team's scouting department, which is these elevations what players they want exactly. So in essence, what I'm taking what you mean by this is Like your best player available might be somebody might not be somebody else's best player available, and that's always the case. So, um, like I said, a lot of times when Atlanta Falcons pick players, and we thought another player was better on the board, um, because we're not in the scouting room, we're not in the scouting department, and they say they weren't picking for need. They said they were picking best player available. So like it was like, well, you had him rated higher on your board than the other guy. In some cases, they have been correct. In some cases, they haven't. We're going to talk about one in just a minute. Let's talk about the free agents because I think in this case, they might have seen it wrong differently than we seen it. So, um, and maybe I think they could have. We they were wrong in this case. Ian Cunningham was born to be a GM, and Matt Ryan moves up to CEO. Cunningham moves up to president of football. There you go. Hey, they got to have some success for a while for something like that to happen, though. Um, why so early tonight, Rakundo? I'm waiting on your response. Um, come on, man. Don't ask no silly questions. Don't ask questions you already know the answer to, Eddie. You know I'm on the tube right now. Uh, GM is taking a page from the Cowboy draft strategy of gaining picks, the same draft as well, adding for next year's draft. Okay, I'm just gonna say because I don't think the Cowboys are the only one to do that, but I'm tracking. Um, Ian Cunningham will make some trades for those picks. Yeah, he's gonna have to. If you want to get more picks, he's gonna have to make some trades. 100%. Um, you will always find good players later rounds, but sometimes it take a couple years for them to play like um, true rookie starter. Exactly. So go back to one of the things that he mentioned, and he's talking about it might take a while, but you go back to um, this whole thing here where you draft, develop, and retain, right? So one thing he mentioned about you want to draft, develop, and retain players. When you draft players, you got to develop. Some players got to be developed. Some players don't come right out the shoot ready to to be those starters you want them to be. So um, you got to develop players. You got to have the fit. So that's why it's so important. You get with the coaching staff, like how can you use this player if we draft it, right? They got to have a plan for them. They need to be able to have a game plan for how they're going to utilize that player even if you go best available player, right? Usually when you go best available though, you know how you can use him because he's probably already doing some stuff that you like. Yeah, we already got somebody can do that, but we got two of them. So that's how you because I already got somebody that does that. Now I can use him the same way I used the other guy. That's how you can see the vision. But you always gotta have a vision for a guy. You want to develop them, give them a plan to get better. And then, like I said, the retain part, a lot, it depends on the cap because money is funny, right? So it depends on the cap. But if you can draft these guys, develop them, and try to retain them, that's what you want to try to do. So that's the way you have to look at it and make that thing happen. But when we're talking about draft picks, um, I just think that this is one of the things that um, was interesting to hear when he said he loved draft picks, and he said you use those things like currency. That's different. That's something we haven't heard before, and so I'm really interested to see how he utilized the draft picks, moving forward, and how he can collect those. All right. I think that the big things that got the most headline today, we're going to talk about it, because one of the reporters asked about Michael Penix Jr. and I don't know why this got headlines, but it did, and it was mentioned that the reporter asked, "Is Michael Penix the starter once healthy?" And Matt Ryan claimed he stated that they're not the head coach, so they can't say that right now, right? Which is okay. That's fine. That is fine. So all I can say about Michael Penix Jr. is that they want Michael Penix Jr. to be the starter, right? That should be their plan. But they can't guarantee that Michael Penix is going to be the starter right now. He first of all, he's not even healthy, right? So if he was healthy, it'd be easy. Yes, he's the starter. If that's their vision for this team, but they have to bring in competition, right? You want to do it the right way. Now, like I said, the best thing for me is to have Michael Penix be the starter because you have that rookie contract that you can deal with, and he can move forward. If he stay healthy and stuff like that, that's what you want to see, right? But don't make it for more than what it is. Michael Penix is not healthy right now, and of course they're not just gonna come out. And Matt Ryan and the GM is not going to tell Kevin Stefanski, you got to start Michael Penix Jr. It's his team. That's the kind of crap that happened in Cleveland, right? That's not how you coach a team, right? They want Michael Penix to be the guy. Trust me, they want him to be the guy. But it's up to Michael Penix and whoever they bring in for competition to determine if he's going to be the guy. That's how it should work. That's how it always should work. They shouldn't have to say that. Now, once and the reason I say this more than anything, Michael Penix haven't did anything to just be guaranteed your starting job. We don't know if he's the guy yet. That's just the honest truth, right? He has not put enough game film out there to determine, yes, he's the future for the Atlanta Falcons. That's it. That is unfair to him to say that, and it's not a slight on him. It's just a fact. He has not put enough. He hasn't done enough to say he's a starter. So, and they didn't draft him. So it's the smartest thing to do is to do it the way they did it. Like you bring in competition. You want him to be the starter. Yes, that's where they want. They want him to be the guy. But they're not going to just say that right now and for to please everybody, right? That's not the way you do. They haven't even really had real discussions on the quarterback on the roster yet. And you want those guys that who didn't draft Michael Penix, who's injured, to come out and say he the starter in February. That's not the way they should do it. So I don't know why ESPN had to put a whole um, you know article out about it. But this is not a big deal. This is not a big issue. But I had to come talk about it because everybody was saying that Matt Ryan could not solidify that Michael Penix is going to be the starter. So what? It's February. Michael Penix is injured. And Michael Penix only played 12 games. We need to see Michael Penix play a whole season before we can say, yes, he's the starter for the Atlanta Falcons. A healthy Michael Penix. That's where it should be. And that's the way they should approach the whole subject. So, like, the whole idea of saying, yes, he's the starter, they don't have to say that right now. And you're not going to tell a coach because he's the coach. Don't never start to do that. Yes, he's going to be our starter. You ask the coach that. Then now the coach says yes or nay. Then you can have those questions. But they haven't seen Michael Penix throw one pass in their system, right? They haven't seen none of that yet. So how can they say the new regime say yes, he's our starting quarterback? Trust me, none of these guys came to Atlanta because Michael Penix. They like him. They think he has potential, but that's not the reason. It's not like, yeah, I came to this team because we got Patrick Mahomes, we got Josh Allen, we got Lamar Jackson. Nobody came because they said we got Michael Penix. They probably say we got Bijan, but not Michael Penix. It's just being honest, guys. Like, we want him to be the starter. They want him to be the starter, but he has to go out and take it. That's what they want. They want Michael Penix to take the starting job. That's what they want. But until he get healthy and get on the field, nobody's going to come out and be like, yeah, he's a starter. That's the crap that Arthur Smith did with Desmond Ritter, right? Yeah, Desmond Ritter is our starter. He only had played 3 games that season, and we see how that turned out. But he drafted Desmond Ritter, so now I can see Raheem Morris saying that, right? He drafted him and Terry drafted Michael Penix. So if they come out and say that, yes, but you're not going to ask somebody that didn't draft the guy to come in and be like, yes, he's our starter, who's injured right now. Yeah. So, um, do you think Ian will trade Jesse Bates? No. I ain't gonna even say nothing else about it. No, he will not trade Jesse Bates. No, I do not think that. Um, Michael Penix is on track to be cleared by April this year. However, you know the rest that we've discussed numerous times. Michael Penix and this current staff, yeah, they got to become believers of Michael Penix. That's just as simple as that. They have to become believers, right? You're not sold until he make you. It's up to him to because he's not their guy. They didn't draft him, right? So nobody in that front office drafted Michael Penix. So he has to, you know, up his resume for these guys to be like, yes, he's our guy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm pretty sure they would love him to be that guy because that only helps the team, you know, progress faster, and they don't have to worry about trying to go out and find a sitting caller. So that's one of the good things about this whole thing. Says it's safe to say he's going in the season started because he has high draft pick, but not to say he's the franchise quarterback yet. It's MP job to lose, and that's on him 100%. That's I agree. What Eddie just said is 100% is correct. Um, he might start the season starter, but hey, he could be on a short leash. It's just bottom line. Right? Especially depending on who they bring in as for competition, and they could bring as a competition. And there's nothing wrong with that either. So um, that's just the way it goes. So guys, pretty much, um, that's a quick. I don't know if it was quick, but that was a brief, you know, synopsis of what Ian Cunningham had to say today. Um, if you haven't seen the interview, go look at it. The dude's ecstatic by being here. One of the things that he did talk about, and the last thing I'm gonna talk about is small egos and big mission. So this is where the whole collaboration between those three guys has got to work, right? He mentioned this when he worked with Ryan Poles, is the guy didn't have an ego, but it's all about the mission, right? He don't want group think, right? They want to have healthy discussions where you don't agree on things. That is healthy. That's really good for organizations to really do that. But the whole this is what I do. I got the final say and stuff like no. You need to have great discussions. Nobody has an ego. We know Matty Ice don't is not built like that. He's a hard ass. Don't get me wrong. Um, if you didn't know, but that's the way it needs to be. Kevin Stefanski seems like he's good to work with. Obviously, I think he got kind of ran over in Cleveland a little bit, right? So he should be somebody that's open to listening and stuff like that. Then Ian Cunningham coming in. The interesting thing about Matt and Ian Cunningham, this is their first time, in these roles and these positions. So they're gonna have to lean on the head coach a little bit, I think, and to help navigate this whole thing, right? This is new for Ian Cunningham, even though he was assistant GM. It sounds like he already had a process in place. He already talked about he want to meet with the president of football, the head coach, defense coordinator, offensive coordinator to go through the restricted free agents and unrestricted free agents, right? That's already in plan in place. Next week on Monday, he got his draft meeting, right? So he's already set his timeline down, things he want to start working on, and it's going to be busy here for him, right? He's just getting this building. He got to learn the team. He got to learn his own team, his scouts and stuff like that. So this is a busy time for him, but you kind of working on the vision that they laid out for one another. I mean, for this team moving forward, starting in the trenches, right? Starting there, building that to the foundation, and then moving out from that. I think the Atlanta Falcons, you know, can have a really good thing moving forward. Um, Said they're counting on substantial expertise. Yes, they are. That's what I'm saying. That 100%. He's the veteran in this whole trio. Kevin Stefanski. He's been here for. He's been a coach for 6 years, going on 7. So he knows, how this thing should be laid out, right? And he's going to lead these guys, right? But that collaboration is going to be huge, and but as long as those guys have the same vision, and that's building in the trenches, and you know, keep it simple, stupid. We're going to run the ball, throw the ball off the run. We're going to stop the run and get the quarterback. That's easy, man. That's easy, right? You're not overthinking things, right? That's how you want to build this team. You look at the roster and see, do you have the pieces on the roster to do those 4 things that you want to do, right? And then, you know, build from that. And if they can do that, that'll be awesome. So, um, small egos and big mission, right? Just taking some quotes from what he had to say today. So, and I thought all those things was huge. All right, the last thing we'll talk about today, guys, is free agent targets. I told you guys I was going to talk about some more free agents. I mentioned I think like 5 free agents yesterday, but it's a lot of free agents out there that the Atlanta Falcons could definitely target. And I was just looking at our own free agents first and kind of sign out who they might lose. And so if they lose this guy, they can replace him with this guy and stuff like that. We talked about the trenches, so we want to talk about trying to upgrade the trenches in certain areas and things like that. So when I looked at the free agents, and I just went off ESPN top 50 free agents. So if you guys want to go look at that, there's some guys on there I did not pick. But for me, what I decided to do was just pick a couple free agents. Not a couple, it's a little bit more than a couple. We're gonna go through all of them, but we just want to talk about these guys and how I think, if you lose this guy or add this guy to the guy that you keep, right? Go back to yesterday and look at how the Atlanta Falcons able to add these free agents by, making those moves with the salary cap. What I talked about, getting that $20 million, increase. That's going to help out a lot for a lot of teams. But the Atlanta Falcons can make so much more cap space if they restructure some deals as well. So, but let's go. So the first person that I want to mention is Tyler Linderbaum, right? The center. The center, he's going to be a free agent from the Baltimore Ravens. He's 26 years old, right? And like I said, I like the Atlanta Falcons offensive line, but if you're trying to build from the trenches, why not go get the upgrade at one of your positions? And if you get Tyler Linderbaum, yes, I do believe he's an upgrade from Ryan Newsel. That's just honest, being honest about it. Yes, I do think he's an upgrade. So going to get Tyler Linderbaum at your center position, and I always reference this. So if you go back to our Super Bowl season in 2016, that when they got Alex Max, 10-year vet from the Cleveland Browns, right? And the rest is history. That was one of the best offensive lines. It helped the young quarterback out. I mean, not young. Matt wasn't young, but it will help a young quarterback out. But Matt said himself, Alex Mack called a lot of the protections, and he helped them out a lot because the veteran center you bring in, they make all the calls for protections and things like that, and it take a little pressure off your quarterback, right? Quarterback needs to know those things, but if you got a really experienced center in there, you can bring somebody like that in. Tyler Linderbaum was a really good center, right? He was highly touted coming out of college, and I thought Atlanta Falcons was going to take him, right? That's what they was really having issues at their center position. But now that he's a free agent, I think it's a really good idea for the Atlanta Falcons to upgrade the line. I like Ryan Newsel, not hating on him, but if you can find somebody that's better, why not upgrade at the center position, right? Let's go to the defensive line. Defensive line, I talked about him yesterday. John Franklin Myers. I did mention him yesterday. John Franklin Myers from the Denver Broncos, a guy who had 8.5 sacks, right? From the interior on that defensive line. He's young. He's still a younger defensive tackle as well. Somebody that can grow with your team. Um, this a guy that you probably would bring in if you lose Dave Amiyata, right? Right now, if you look at, you know, David Amiyata is sitting at the top right now as defensive tackle. He had a really good season, just being honest with you. So they might want to keep him on, but I don't think it would hurt to bring in another defensive lineman. So John Franklin Myers from the Denver Broncos, yes, I think they should definitely consider bringing him in. Um, Quay Walker, guys, I know you know who that is. Former Georgia Bulldogs, really outstanding inside linebacker from the Green Bay Packers. If they decide they don't want to keep Caden Ellis, they could definitely pivot and go to Quay Walker. You put Quay Walker beside Divine Diablo. I think that will really be good. Um, I love his athletic ability, being able to get the quarterback. He's maybe a little bit better in space than Caden Ellis is, but of course, Caden Ellis was utilized, as a Swiss Army knife for in this defense. I think it would be, unfortunate if we do lose him. But if they do, they can actually go get a guy like Quay Walker. Like some of these guys, now the other team might, you know, convince those guys to stay. But at this point, right now, they are going to be considered free agents. So why not, take a shot at it if you can, and see can you get him here. Another guy, if we lose out on Kyle Pitts, Isaiah Likely. Of course, we all know who that is. Tight end from the Baltimore Ravens, right? They got they got Andrews there, Mark Andrews there. Isaiah Likely is a free agent. Don't know if they'll be able to keep him. If he goes on the market, they lose Kyle Pitts. Atlanta Falcons could definitely go in and get Isaiah Likely. Um, I think he would fit really well into Kevin Stefanski offense, and that's somebody that they definitely could be looking at. So Isaiah Likely is a guy that the Atlanta Falcons could target. So right now, guys, Tyler in the Bum, John Franklin Myers, Quay Walker, and Isaiah Likely. All right, let's look at some of these comments before we go to finish the list. Ricardo is going to bring the backup quarterback from Chi-Town, Tyson Bagger, um, to give MPG some push your quarterback. Maybe, but they would have to trade for him. So I don't know. He's still in the contract, so they would have to. And right now he won't drop picks. So I don't know if he's going to give up in drop picks for that. But you never know. Um, he said Quay is getting a little more in pay. He is heavily targeted. Cap won't be there, especially if your focus is Pitts in London. Like I said, depends on if they lose some. So these guys I'm talking about, if they can't keep some of the guys that they want to keep, right? So that's why I'm talking to these guys. Like if you lose out on one of your own free agents, let's see can you upgrade at another position with another free agent. That's what I'm saying. So you never know, right? Well, we don't know what Quay Walker will be going for, but if they can pull it off and get a guy like that, it depends. We know that the last regime didn't like to spend a lot of money, right? The first time the Atlanta Falcons spent some money on a free agent was Jesse Bates the third, and that's the and look what he's been ever done. He had a pick six in every year since he's been with us. Like that's where you go for it, right? So if you have the opportunity to go get one of these really really good free agents, go out and get them. So, um, we don't know, this new regime philosophy and that we'll have to find out and see if they're going to be aggressive or they're not going to be aggressive. He did mention that he's not going to mortgage the future, right? You got to be thinking about the now and the future. So that is going to be important. Um, T. Terry said Walker is a great trade. Building, yes. Yep, I would. Like I said, Quay Walker, man, would be my guy. So, if they can get him, right? All right, let's go to some couple of receivers. I mentioned these guys yesterday as well. Rashid Raheed and Wandale Robinson. Simply because these guys can stretch the field. You want somebody to be able to stretch the field when you got a guy like Michael Penix back there throwing the ball. So Both of these guys going to be free agents. Rashid Raheed is going in the Super Bowl right now. You know, a really really good returner as well as a receiver, right? Somebody that can, like I said, can stretch the field. Wendell Robinson had one of his best seasons with the New York Giants. Be interested in the New York Giants try to bring him back, but he's a free agent right now. So Rashid Shaheed and Wendell Robinson, both of those receivers. Um, let's see if they can get somebody that can stretch the field. I think the Atlanta Falcons do not have that guy currently on the team right now. So that is an upgrade that they will need to make. Shelby Harris, I talked about him yesterday as well. A little bit on the older side, but he is a guy that's coming from the Cleveland Browns, have some familiarity with Kevin Stefanski. So if they want to target him, a defensive lineman to come in, and if you decide to keep David Amanyata and bring him back, you can add a Shelby Harris beside that. Two veterans to go with the younger um, players that you got on the team. You need a little mixture of veterans and young guys. So Shelby Harris definitely be one of the guys they could would be considered. Um, Eddie said Rashid Raheed would be good pickup for any team that don't have a special team ace. Yes, like I said, he's good in special teams and he can stretch the field as well. All right, let's go to a linebacker. Um, a couple of linebackers that the Atlanta Falcons could look at. Leo Chenal from the Kansas City Chiefs, Nakobe Dean from the Philadelphia Eagles. The Atlanta Falcons had an opportunity to draft Nakobe Dean when they drafted Troy Anderson, and we see how they worked out. Troy Anderson was a a combine darling. His physical traits and things he was able to do. The guy ran a 4.440, the size and speed and everything. Played running back, played quarterback, played linebacker. Just a athlete. So I understand why they decided to go with Troy Anderson. But Nakobe Dean was a proven um, guy at the position. And the Atlanta Falcons decided to go Troy Anderson instead of Nakobe Dean. But they can rectify that mistake and bring Nakobe Dean back to to Georgia. So he's going to be a free agent this year. I don't think the Philadelphia Eagles can keep him, so he's going to be on the market. But Nakobe Dean is a guy that we all watched, his career in Georgia, and was really impressed about some of the stuff he was able to do. Um, he's able to rush the passer, somewhat so in coverage, but you bring a guy like Kobe Dean in. This is like I said, if you're not going to be able to keep um, Caden Ellis, Devin Bush as another linebacker. So Leo Chenal, Nakobe Dean, and Devin Bush, all those guys could be, targets for Atlanta Falcons at the linebacker position because you want to be able to create depth there. And so there you go. Eddie Williams said Cowboys are getting the Kobe Dean. He coming there with a new DC. Facts. Good in space linebacker. Well, we're going to outbid the Cowboys. Cowboys they got to pay George Pickens. So no, they're not getting the Kobe Dean. Oh man. I know that's you definitely you. I know you want the Kobe Dean, man. Let's go back to tight end, right? Like I said, if you don't get Kyle Pitts, they could actually target Dallas Goedert, right? Another tight end, solid tight end would fit into Kevin Stefanski offense well. So that's somebody they can really look at. Dallas Goedert, also I didn't mention David Njoku is going to be a free agent as well. Familiarity with the head coach, so you can bring him in. So tight ends, Dallas Goedert, David Njoku. And then last two guys, couple of defensive linemen, Daquan Jones from the Buffalo Bills, or the Detroit Lions. I can't remember. One of those teams. Either Detroit Lions or the Buffalo Bills, Daquan Jones. He's a little older, but you can bring him in. Like I said, defensive front, you want a little mixture of veteran guys with some young guys. And then Sebastian Joseph Day, D lineman as well. So those are some of the guys that the Atlanta Falcons can target in free agency. Like I said, I went off where I think some holes at on the team. Now, when we talking about best available players, that's in the draft. in free agency, the Atlanta Falcons should be looking for needs, right? Because these guys are proven, right? They got film out there. We already know what they can do in the NFL. So when you're in free agency, you are signing guys for needs, right? You need this position. You need to create more depth at this position. That's what you're doing. So in free agency, you are going for needs 100%. Draft is best player available, but when you're doing free agency, it's always for needs. So that's one of the things that I definitely think the Atlanta Falcons could get. It's a lot of more guys out there. Like I said, I didn't go right down the whole list and look at the free agents, but um, from what I think the Falcons going to need to do some of the things that they talk about with their vision, and that's the trenches, offense, defense, alignment. You need the front seven to be good. That's why I mentioned so many linebackers. Um, and it's simply because some are our own free agents and at those positions as well. We might lose. We might lose a David Omiyata. We might lose a Kate Nellis. We might lose a Kyle Pitts. So you want to be able to replace all those guys that play a pivotal roles in the 2025 Atlanta Falcons, right? And then you need to either add more once you replace those guys. So that's why it's huge to be able to do that, right? If you can retain those guys, that's good because now you can just add because you know what you're going to get from those three guys because they was here, they was really productive for the team last year. You hopefully they keep that, be consistent in those areas. And if they do, that's good. If they don't, that would be the case. So, um, but guys, there you have it, man. There you have it. A says Devin Bush wants to play with Schwartz and Stefanski. They they review they revive his career. Well, if you heard what Todd Monken said today about Jim Schwartz is probably not coming back to Cleveland, right? He pretty much don't care if Jim Schwartz come back. That I mean, if he comes back after that interview, that press conference today, I'll be surprised. Basically said he didn't come to Cleveland for Jim Schwartz. Right? He came for the players. He said when he was scheming for the Cleveland Browns, he was scheming the players, not the coach. So, um, wow, that was a shock. The way he said it. Now, like I said, they might already had conversations, whatever, but he pretty much don't care if Jim Schwartz come back or not. So that would be interesting to see if that happens. Um, but he did say they're going to play the same defense, so they're gonna have to find somebody that can run Jim Schwartz defense if you're going to try to run the same defense. So um, we'll definitely see what outcome comes the defense player. Maybe Jim Schwartz, you know, you know, water on the bridge and come back and still coach that defense. We'll definitely see that. Um, Last comment, Eddie said, good free agent mentioned Recondo, but no matter how good some of those guys are, they may not fit this coaching regime scheme 100%. Like I said, the whole thing is if I get this guy, how can you use him, right? We look at talent a lot of times and pretty much determine um, that, man, that guy fit good. And no, like sometimes it don't work out the way you want it to work out, right? You get a guy and they just don't do what they did, and just like we brought Justin Simmons in, one of the best safeties, right? And either he fell off, over the years, but he did not look good in Atlanta Falcons uniform. He just didn't. Um, so sometimes you never know. But do you look at guys like what is his name? Cordell Patterson, right? Cordell Patterson. People probably thought Cordell Patterson was out the league, but he came to Atlanta, and Arthur Smith had a vision for him, and he was one of the best players for Atlanta during that time, right? Think about it, how good Carter Patterson looked. Um, so you never know when you get a guy, and I thought that was one thing that Bill Belichick was really good at, um, bringing guys in that maybe didn't have so much success at another place, but he gave them a role and they shine in their roles, right? You look at some of the receivers Tom Brady threw to over the years, right? And a lot of those guys, man, they wasn't household names. Tom Brady made them household names, right? Look at the Wes Welkers, look at the Julia Ellermans and stuff like that. I believe if they went to any other team, they wouldn't have been that successful. It was a perfect fit for them at that organization, and they shined doing their thing. So, I mean, that's what I'm talking about. You never know. So, Eddie, you right. The free whatever free agents you get, they got to fit your team, fit your skill system, and they got to be utilized the right way. So um, that's the whole argument for Kyle Pitts right now. People envision him being utilized differently because the way Atlanta Falcons been using throughout the years has not been, you know, to show all the skill sets that he got. And hopefully, we can keep him and Kevin Stefanski can highlight all those things and he can finally live up to his potential. So there you have it, guys. The free agents for potentially that Atlanta Falcons could target this season. Um, we heard from our new GM, the guy's gonna be busy. It's just no other way around it. Don't know the team. Don't he's supposed to be talking. He mentioned that he was going to talk with the capologist tomorrow, right? So he got to get the cap, man. He don't even know how much money we got. I got a lot of work to do, right? Got a lot of catching up to do. So he's gonna be busy. The next time we hear from this guy, they mentioned was be at the combine. We'll hear from him, Kevin Stefanski. We'll hear from both of those guys at the combine. We'll hear from those guys again, and see if they can shine some more light. The quarterback question is not going to go away until they make a determination on that. I still believe Kirk Cousins is going to be cut, and then that's going to even open up even more questions once that happens because once he get cut, right? Now who's going to be the backup for Michael Penix? Who's you going to bring in for competition for Michael Penix? That will be the next question. So man, you got to take a look. And so these guys got to get to work, man. Get to work. None of these guys on this team, was picked by this new front office. So they is no invested. This my guy. Only Matt maybe because his offensive lineman that he had here, right? All these guys. He actually played with Jake Matthews, Chris Lindstrom, and um, Caleb McGarry. He actually played with those guys. Everybody else, Matt Ryan, don't know those guys. So, hey, AJ Terrell was here too. Let me take it back. AJ Terrell. Yeah, so it's a couple of guys here. There's four guys that Matt Ryan probably, suited up with. But for everybody else, hey, they got to go out and deliver, or they'll be playing somewhere else. All right. That's all I have, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I'm not sure when I'm coming back. I got to look at and see if we get any more news. Um, but be on the lookout for it. But I'm excited. I know you guys are excited. Now the three guys are there. They need to get to work and get really intentional about what they're gonna do leading into the new league year. This is your boy Ricondo coming back at you with another video. Peace.